Good evening, Kevin.
Tell us what you found around these schools, because our thought was that white privilege is actually unlawful to teach as fact, and yet it is being taught as fact.
Yeah, it's unlawful under Section 406 of the Education Act 1996 for teachers to teach about politically contentious subjects in a partisan way. So political indoctrination in the classroom of any kind is against the law and has been for many years. But I think teachers are teaching children that all white people are privileged, that the police are systemically racist, that masculinity is toxic, and so forth. The kind of various shibboleths of the kind of woke cosmology. And they don't think that in teaching these things and not countenancing any dissent from those points of view, casting anyone who dissents from those points of view as completely beyond the pale, a kind of far-right extremist who should probably be referred to prevent. They don't think of themselves, I don't think, as breaking that law, because they don't think of these things as politically contentious. They think of them as incontestable facts, just the same as you teach the theory of evolution in biology. So it's a big, deep-rooted problem, and we've identified 15 schools that have been teaching children that all white people are privileged, that the police are systemically racist, that masculinity is toxic, and so forth. Just 15. We've got 15 examples, but we think that's the tip of the iceberg. And the bigger problem, Kevin, is not just that this sort of thing is going on in schools, and that the schools are flouting the law, largely, I think, because they're ignorant of the law. The bigger problem is that there's no way for parents who are concerned about this to complain. So again and again, parents who are members of the Free Speech Union have contacted us, and they've said, well, initially we complained to the head teacher. The head teacher referred us to the governing body. The governing body referred us to the Department for Education. The DfE referred us to Ofsted, and Ofsted referred us back to the head teacher. So they're being sent round and round in circles. No one is willing to take responsibility to make sure that the law is enforced in these schools.
Fine work by the Free Speech Union to uncover these alarming facts, but no disrespect, but I don't find them that surprising because, we know what teachers are like around this country. You've got one example of a teacher telling his class that Donald Trump was exactly the same as Adolf Hitler. This is the kind of nonsense that's being pumped at our kids. Kids are being indoctrinated into this sort of left-wing teacher worldview. And my question to you, Toby, is, why isn't the government doing anything about it? We all know it's going on. We have statements from the government saying, we had the Education Secretary the other day saying, oh, this has to stop. Well, when is it going to stop? What is the government going to do about it? Why has it not done anything about it so far?
Well, it did try and do something in 2014. So the Department for Education issued some new guidance in 2014, which told schools they had an obligation to promote British values, such as the rule of law, tolerance for different religions and different beliefs, that kind of thing. But it was fairly wishy-washy, fairly anodyne. And I don't think, and Ofsted are responsible, I think, for making sure that schools do promote British values. But often we see the history of Britain being portrayed in these schools as, an unending litany of exploitation and appropriation and theft, particularly the British Empire. We even heard Boris Johnson today at COP26 denouncing Britain's role in the Industrial Revolution and essentially saying that Britain had a great deal of responsibility for the toxification of our planet because it brought industrialization to the world. not acknowledging that that ended up, vastly increasing the average lifespan, reducing infant mortality, liberating people from a life of unending drudgery. It was as if without the Industrial Revolution, we'd all be dancing away under maypoles, reciting poetry in kind of cotton smocks. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. But if the leader of the country, the prime minister, who purports to be a conservative, is able to denigrate Britain's historical role in bringing that kind of wealth to the world, then it's not surprising that even under a conservative government, schools aren't doing a great deal to promote British values, which they were told to do in 2014. There's going to be some more guidance issued by the DfE beginning of next year, we think, which will tell schools that they really have to be impartial when teaching children about these kinds of controversial topics. They're not supposed to take sides. And I hope that that guidance will not only include a long list of topics which are in fact politically controversial and not incontestable fact, as many schools and teachers seem to believe, such as all white people are privileged. But I also hope that they add to the values that schools are obliged to promote in that 2014 guidance. I hope they add freedom of speech as one of the British values that schools should be promoting to children.
Nadhim Zahawi, the Education Secretary, did say only recently, earlier this month, that they should not be teaching white privilege as if it were a fact, because that was a contested view. I thought that was a rather mild way of putting it. I think it's completely discredited, actually. Nadhim Zahawi, he's got some work to do, hasn't he? He's got to get this message across to the schools because they're either not getting it or they're not listening.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the facts which blatantly contradicts the whole white privilege philosophy is that white working class boys are the lowest achieving demographic when it comes to GCSEs. They do worse than any other demographic, including African Caribbean boys. So the notion that all white people are privileged and that you're going to address inequality by telling white working class boys that they should acknowledge their guilt for the role of white people in the slave trade and that the odds are stacked in their favor is hardly going to help boost their attainment, which is the biggest problem our education system is currently facing.
You're something of an expert in the field of education. You've worked with schools and obviously you've done this research into white privilege, the teaching thereof. How worried should we be that our kids are being indoctrinated by left-wing teachers who either are stupid enough to believe that their dogma is fact or just don't really care and are deliberately warping these kids' minds? How worried should we be, Toby?
Well, I don't think that, the teaching profession is riddled with kind of Marxist revolutionaries who want to recruit, useful idiots to the cause to try and overthrow the capitalist state. Most of them are very well-meaning, good people. And I think they just believe that in teaching children about white privilege, in telling children that they should protest more about climate change, about police brutality, about the inequalities in the criminal justice system and so forth, that they'll be improving the world. They'll be encouraging these children to create a better society. And they have this kind of, this missionary zeal to promote this particular social justice agenda. I think the consequences of that, the thing we should be worried about is that it's undermining, I think, many people's confidence in Britain. There's no pride in Britain. There's no sense that we are a great country who has done great things and made a huge contribution, a hugely positive contribution to the world and the world's history. And you're leaving children with a kind of sense of shame about who they are and about their identity. And I think into that vacuum, a lot of kind of much more dangerous, much more toxic ideologies can quickly find root. So I think that's the real danger.
And then they go to university where it gets even worse.
Yeah, it is generally about 50% now of school leavers go on to university, and as you say, the lack of viewpoint diversity, the absence of any conservatives in universities. Anyone saying anything positive about Britain or its history, I mean, is really stark. That's an even more acute problem. Yeah, by the time they've left university, very, very few graduates are willing to dissent in any way from woke orthodoxy, lest they be shamed and cancelled.
It's a very worrying situation, but good work by the Free Speech Union there, Toby.